Okay, I'm Tanya Finchum. I'm here with Belle
Wiedemann.
and we're at her home in Yukon, Oklahoma. And today is May the 2nd, 2007. And we're going to be talking about her time in when she was a House representative from 1968 to 72, elected in 1967, from Canadian County, District 43, correct?
Right.
All right. And this is part of the Women of Oklahoma Legislature, the Oral History Project being completed by the Oklahoma State University Library. Okay. I'm so glad you agreed to talk with me today.
Well, I was glad to have you in my home.
Thank you.
It's been delightful.
All right. First question. We're going to bring us up to date a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, date of birth, siblings, that type of thing.
Well, as you know, you say that you can get old as dirt, and that's kind of what I am. I was born in 1931, July the 22nd, in, they called it Piedmont, Oklahoma, which was a country home. It was west of Piedmont. And I had wonderful parents, no electricity at that time and no telephone. And we did have propane for our heating. I had two sisters, one that was 2 years older than I am and one that was 4 years younger than I am. And of course, at that time, when you're out on the farm, someone always asked if we had problems with their children. Well, when you're 15 miles from the largest town, which was El Reno, the county seat, we didn't go to town very much, so no, we weren't in trouble. And I think that maybe we were the happiest people going at that time, because I remember when rural electric co-ops came in and brought the electricity, and I was about 7 years old. And what a joy it was to have electricity, and we didn't have the iceman anymore that come and brought the block of ice that put in your refrigerator. And it was called an ice box then. And as time went on, the school that I went to, grade school, was Racine, and it was a fourth of a mile south of the house, but set on the property, and so we walked to school every day. I went my full 8 years to the rural school. In the last 3 years of that 8 years, there was only 3 students in that school.
Okay.
But when I took my county exam, at that time the county superintendent came in and gave the exam to you, and to pass whether I could go on to high school. And I was third highest in the county. The two that defeated me for salutatorian and valedictorian was a brother and a sister. Now, isn't that something? They were country schools also. So I have very fond, but I knew I had to get that test won and made up, because I sure didn't want to stay in that little one-room school the rest of my next year. So then I went to OOHRP to high school. And during high school, we didn't have FFA, but agriculture was always a prominent thing in my life, because that's all my father did. And my mother always had a lot of chickens. So I wanted to take agriculture. So the last 2 years, we did have a course in agriculture, and there was only 2 girls in that class. But FFA still wasn't prominent at that time and was not taught in the school. So I never was an FFA member, but later here in life, I've belonged to the alumni and supported, and have been one of their heroes, as I call it. But and after graduating from high school, my sister went to OSU.
Okay.
And she became a elementary teacher and a special ed teacher. And you hate to say that you don't particularly get the education you want, but my parents at that time, there was not a lot of money to go around, and my younger sister went to Drawn's business school, and I married. I married after we got out of, I got out of high school, And we moved. I married Carl, and we moved to a farm that was school land. His dad had rented this school land for many years. And just before we got married, someone had rented this another little house that we were to move in. So we lived 1 month or so with his parents, and usually that's a disaster. But he had the most wonderful parents that he could ever have. And so then we moved on down to the school land when we got this little house cleaned up that was on it. And on my 19th birthday, I stood there in the yard at his folks because we helped them milk the cows, and he was going to farm with his father, which he had been. And I reached in my pocket, and I had a dime, a thin dime. And that was about all we had. We had no money, we were in love. And after I stood there and saw the milk truck come in to pick up the milk cans that we had processed for the delivery man, Mr. Briscoe, I felt this dime in my pocket, and here come his sister and brother-in-law driving in, and it was a long house trailer. They were coming back from Germany from the war, and he had been in the postal department in Germany. But it was a new Lincoln car that was pulling this trailer. And as I reached back down in to get this thin dime, I thought, well, now I have not gone to college like a lot of them would or could. And I worked there on the farm. But someday that I would own a farm and drive a Lincoln, I put a goal in my head, because I knew that we was going to have to work. And so then later I got an outside job and worked for Dr. Leroy Goodman on Main Street of Yukon. And he was a precious doctor, as you'd say. A lot of his patients, if they had no money, they didn't have to pay him. If they had money, it was $3 for an office call. Mm. And he was just like a father to Carl and I, and worked for him about 5 years, and then we rented some more land. Just kept saving, and I made $99 a month working for Dr. Goodman. Then later I got a small job in Oklahoma City with Rothschilds, and rode the bus from Yukon to Oklahoma City for 50 cents a day, and kept saving. And we had a lot of chickens and a lot of cattle, and when we still lived on the school land, we had to pump all the water by hand. Mm. Then my parents decided they would move to El Reno, and we have acquired that estate at this time. We moved there and began to farm bigger, and then his folks passed away, and they put that place up for auction, and we were fortunate enough to acquire it. And just as the years gone on, we've just kind of put what we call the /C ranch together, and it consists of about 3 sections of land through here now. And
did you ever get your Lincoln?
Pardon?
Did you ever get your Lincoln?
Yes, did I get my Lincoln? Someone else asked me. Yes, I got my Lincoln, and I own that ranch. And that's why I say a goal is so important. And I always thought that if I didn't get that college education, and I regret it, but I had to work 12 hours a day if they worked 8, so I was going to make up in hours, in which I read everything I got my hands on. And I say that you can certainly at that time, I think you could do okay, but now you must have that education. It's just, I don't know what I'd done any different if I'd had, because farming and ranching was in our blood. And when we moved to the, I call it the home place that we acquired at Piedmont or OOHRP, they have 2 addresses there. We had 1,300 chickens that I took care of every day, laying hens, and I really enjoyed that. And that was stemmed from 4-H. I had chickens in 4-H, and G.H. Ware of OSU was always the one that helped us a lot with our type of chicken that we used to have, and turned into a business for me. So, and then we run a lot of cattle, and Carl was very good in taking care. And we've always done our own work. I drove the wheat trucks for 50-some years and enjoyed every bit of it. We always talk about tipping, and I always laugh and say, you know, I don't mind tipping. I know they work for tips, but I never got a tip when I drove that wheat truck across the scales, and nobody ever gave me a tip for bringing that wheat in. But then as time went on, I was active in extension work, and that was our learning process of how to cook and sew and do outside work. And one day when the House of Representatives position was being thought about, and there had been a fellow that had been in District 43, Canadian County, for about 12, 13 years, 14. The people of El Reno came out one day, and the district judge and wanted me to run for the House of Representatives. And I said, can't do that. We farm and ranch, and we're partners, Carl and I, and we had a lot of hogs also. And he said, we need you. You know more about the rural community and the towns of anyone, so you've worked in all the aspects. And they felt like I was well respected in the community. And so I said, no, I'm just not interested. And they came back the night before the last day of filing, and the next morning Judge Whalen came and picked me up and took me to the Capitol and paid my fee, and that's how I got into the House of Representatives. And at that time, women have to be a third to a half better. I mean this sincerely, because people weren't ready for women out in public offices, and you didn't see as many, and especially like 67, 68. I knew I had to overcome that, and then I had to overcome an incumbent that was been there 12 years or more. And then I had to overcome being a lady, and I just put on a white dress that had a red, white, and blue little seam around, and that's how I campaigned, and washed it every night, and we campaigned every day. And also I was a Democrat, and then we had a Republican that filed also, and he was the mayor of El Reno, largest town in Canadian County. So I had to run the primary, and then I had to run the general, and my tongue was hanging out and stepping on it. But I overcome the incumbent and the mayor, and being a woman was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe that. So that was a hard race. And of course, our daughter was about 6, I believe, when I was elected. And naturally, you know, you hate to go off and leave them. So I had a real thing, because I could stay home. I didn't have to go away from home. And I drove back and forth every day. But you have many, many long hours. And then I ran the next 2 years, and I served till 72. And then I had redistricting, which they took out my hometown of Piedmont because Oklahoma City expanded so much. So I lost a third of my good supporters, and we had the 18-year-old vote at that time that came in of the non-residential. And so a young man ran against me, and I think I lost by 60 or 90 votes, something like that.
Not much.
But probably the best thing that ever happened, because I had a good rapport with all of the House of Representatives, and the fellows treated me just as one of them because I was agriculture related, and several bills that now I see that I pushed through that still exist and has helped the community.
Can you tell me about the day you were sworn in? Some of your thoughts and feelings?
Yes, the day I was sworn in was, I can tell you
time,
that.
I guess.
Yes, the first time I had a light blue suit on. I can remember that so very vividly. And I was assigned on the fourth floor. The Democrats were in control of the House, and probably 16 Republicans. And when you have that few of the other party, you pretty well control. So I had a good place for my office. You go by seniority or whatever party you were at that time. And I was on fourth floor, so I just could go around the corner and go into the House chamber. And I officed with two seasoned House members, Ray Trent and Spencer Bernard. And of course, Spencer Bernard became lieutenant governor later. And Rex Privet was the Speaker of the House at that time. So I had some good assignments on my committees, and had a good office where I was. Three of us was in an office there at that time, and three of us shared a secretary. But I never was skirted around that I could ever say as being a female. I was never treated any different. I was never denied anything that people, a lot of them say, were denied. And I never saw anyone because race, creed, or color be excluded or denied of anything. They were, the speakers of the House while I was there were certainly gentlemen in all ways. And
how many other women were there when you were there? Do you remember?
I believe there's three others. Pauline Tabor, Texana Hatchett, I, and Hannah Atkins.
Mm-hmm. So they didn't group you all together, then?
No. Pauline was from southeast Oklahoma, and she'd been there quite a while, and her projects were different than mine. And Texana was a Republican, and Hannah was from the black community, and really a delightful lady. And I've often wondered about the other two. I believe they're deceased. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'll find out and let you know.
But
so describe a typical day. How early would you get up and go, and how late would you stay?
A typical day would be committee meetings sometimes start at 7
a.m.
7 a.m. And sometimes your evening meetings would be at 6 or 7, but wouldn't end till about 10. So once you really got your first week or two beginning of session and into it, you had 4 hard days every week, Monday through Thursday. Then Friday we usually didn't meet, but you never ate a hot meal in your life because the phone rings all the time at home, and that's what we're for. Mm-hmm. We are working for the public. It's their taxpayers' money. And then on Friday night or Saturday night, or you always had something that somebody wanted you to be to, or a banquet or whatever. And my husband went to many things with me, but they always thought he was a lobbyist in the background. A lot of times never knew who he was. And he brought home more information than I did. But I served under Governor Hall as a Democrat, and my first session was with Governor Bartlett, a Republican, and the second was a Democrat. And so I knew kind of both sides of it at that time, of a Republican and Democrat. And then later, when I was in the Department of Ag, Governor Bellman was back in, and he certainly was a friend of mine. I enjoyed him very much and worked with him a lot on different agriculture projects. So, of course, he was U.S. Congress, and he worked with us very closely.
Well, do you remember the day you presented your first bill on the floor?
Well, you're up and down with so many, and you co-authored so many, but one of them was the wine bill to declare Oklahoma wineries so that we could have an Oklahoma winery. At that time, I think they could make up to 200 gallon, and we had... I had one in my district that wanted to become a larger winery, and that was the Swartz Winery. Everybody knows the Swartz Paving Company and the cement and things. That was their father that began the Swartz Winery at OOHRP. And Heber Finch had the one at Sapulpa, so we had two in the state. So we got our bill up and passed it. And of course now there's 68 wineries, I believe, in the state, and the bill needs some working on and things because things have changed. I was asked the other day why I didn't put that they could ship their wine or sell it at different places because there's some provisions in there they can't. But then it wasn't necessary. So, times change, and but that's one of them, and I worked very hard on highway, and I wasn't on their committee, but road projects was very big, and one of my big things was to raise the highway north of Yukon and straighten the correction line, because every time the rain came, they flooded, and no one could get across the river to Yukon or back, and so we got that road accomplished, and a lot of educational bills that we worked on.
Did you do your own research when you were presenting the bill?
We did some, and then we gave it to our research committee, but we didn't have near the research that they have now.
Or the computer.
And yes, we didn't have computers at all in there, and so much of it was done. It was before computers, and you just think back, and it's really, and we didn't have the electronic in the house, and we didn't have the speakers that come into the office to know what was going on. It all was done by pages and your secretaries, and all your bills, mostly your secretaries typed all day long. They were really busy, and we had some very good assistance, but the house, I would say, has grown tenfold with research and
Staff support.
Yes, staff support, and not criticizing, because the whole country has grown tenfold. And I always say, if you don't take progress by the hand, it'll take you by the neck. And so when these new things come in, be sure you research it and look at it. And it may not be for us, but there's so many bills to go through. And a lobbyist is very important to you, because if you're given a 150-page bill and it's going to come up on the floor in a few days or a week or 2 weeks, why, usually there's a lobbyist that comes to assist you and tell you what's in that bill, and you have to trust someone. And if that lobbyist one time crosses you and tells you wrong, you're not going to deal with him, and he probably won't get in your door again. But you have to, lobbyists has always had a bad name in a way. They are out to scheme or whatever, and that's not true. They're very important people, and that was one thing about the first day that I went to the legislature. Why Rex Privet said to me, a lobbyist is very important. They can help you in every way, and you'll find out which ones you want to deal with. And so that's why you see so many lobbyists around, because on whatever bill, whether you're on a farm bill, an oil bill, education bill, or whatever, someone is hired to assist that company to tell you what it's all about.
Well, other than him, was there someone else during your first 6 months or so that you considered your mentor?
I would say my two office mates, Ray Trent from Midwest City and Spencer Bernard, and then Sanguin from down at Hugo. Wayne Sanguin was also in my office, and he was a very close friend of the speaker. And of course, that helped me a lot. But they were really, when you go, and I was glad that I had a secretary that had been there several years, because she was so much help. And then the 2 or 3 men, they may have been 4 of us in the office, but then Wayne and Ray but you would hear them talk, and you would know what kind of was going on around in the chambers and outside. And then in the evenings at that time, we had what we called a cheese room. And the cheese room was usually at the 89er Inn or one of the other hotels north. Depends on what hotel gave you a free room. And we'd maybe have, why it was called cheese, we'd have cheese and Spencer Bernard, one member, he raised peanuts, so we always brought peanuts big, so it was called the cheese room. And we'd all sit around and discuss what was going on, Democrat and Republican, and not scheme, but just what was in the other committees and what you could do, and if there was a way that your friend could vote with you on your bill. And we had a nice relationship that way. We'd last about an hour, but as soon as we dismissed from session, we would head to the cheese room and spend that hour or so that
Debriefing in a way.
Right. And usually no one else showed up. That wives or husbands or something, that was usually a no-no. That was just kind of a little business session that we could do at that time.
Did you do that your entire time that you were?
Yes, did that the entire time. They don't have that understanding anymore.
No one has said that, no.
No.
You're the first one to tell me.
Maybe I wasn't supposed to tell that secret. But it was a very helpful secret, and just, whatever was raised in Oklahoma, or somebody may have dropped something off, but it was really a way to learn that.
Sure.
Yeah, we provided our own. Somebody else didn't. We didn't have to vote for something that we didn't want. It was all of our members just contributed.
Do you stay in touch with any of those from that time period?
Yes, I stay in touch with most of them, and that is, but I believe 60 to 70% are dead from my first session. And that's sad to say. I have to look at the pictures again. But I had a seatmate, Bill, from southeast Oklahoma from the first session. The second sessions was Donald Coffin from Guthrie, Oklahoma, that owns Granny Had One, the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And your seatmates are important. Bill was a lawyer. Can't even think what his last name at this point. But he helped a lot in the law side of it at that time, or you would ask. and Donald. And it's nice to have a good seatmate because things move pretty fast, and you always have to remember that you're dealing with people's business and their lives. It's the most important body that controls the whole state.
Do you get a certain feeling when you walk up the steps into the Capitol?
Yes, the Capitol is always just a great institution, and the nation's capital. When you fly there, you can be there so many times, and just your heart just goes out that. And yes, the state capitol is very dear to me. I just can't believe that I spent some time there, and George and I was always a good friend and still is, and governor and senator and house member, or whatever you want to call him. And
Would you have a favorite moment or two?
Oh, I don't know that I have a favorite moment or two. I had an uncle that always thought I was a favorite moment of his because he served in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Oh.
And
After you or before you?
before me, and he chopped cotton, kind of came up, through the ranks, as you'd say. I never thought he'd ever be in Washington, and so I always heard from him a lot, and never dreamed that I'd ever be. And then, of course, the judge was a distant relative, as you might say, Judge Whalen, and he always made sure that I was treated right, as you'd say. But favorite moments, all of them had a favorite moment, and even some of my bad feelings and experiences are favorite because, it opens your eyes and ears that you want to see that good people serve in government. And 99 9/10 of the people are good people, and their intentions are there to serve their people.
Let's go back to your first campaign. Was your campaign manager a friend or male, female, or?
Well, he was a male, Bruce Haynes at El Reno, and at that time we didn't handle very much money. We done it by handshakes and knocking doors, and he kept me advised of things because he was in the Kiwanis clubs and all of this, kind of knew, where to steer me and what to do. And I didn't have large reports on money because probably my whole campaign maybe was $2,400.
The first.
And the next one wasn't that much either. We didn't, and I had people that was willing to give, and there was no need if everything was paid, so we just didn't handle a lot of money. We walked the streets and talked to the people, and that's...
Did you have a slogan?
Ring the bell for Annabelle. Everybody comes to me, and says that knows me. And I never had any large donations, so, but I always said if you had, I'd rather have 1,000 $1 bill donators as to have one $1,000. Because those that contribute $1 to you really mean that they want you to be there because they're people that came up and are concerned. And I always carried... like I say, I carried my hometown of OOHRP where I went to school. I always said I only lost 3 votes up there. And, that always speaks well for you when you are raised in a community and they support you wholeheartedly.
Well, from El Reno, so you would have spent some time in the Carnegie Library there.
Yes. Very nice, and I think they're getting ready to redo some more on that now. But the Black community, I always enjoyed working with them. They had a good say as long as I was there. I enjoyed working with them. The El Reno College was another thing that I supported very heavily. It was first in the old post office building downtown. And I remember a fond moment of when Dr. Harrison, the president of the college then, came to me and they needed some funding. And I said, well, we'll get the appropriations and budget chairman and we'll talk to him if there is any way. And got Dr. Harrison and the appropriation budget together, and we sat down and had a piece of pie and talked about it. And when we left, I often had to laugh. Dr. Harrison said, I don't believe that guy understood a thing I said. And I said, oh, yes. And he got his appropriation. Thank you. So, it's just one-on-one is knowing people. But, a campaign's hard. Oh, I tell you, it's when you knock that door, it was easier then. People answered their door. Television wasn't the thing because you couldn't advertise on television. Local paper and your newspaper ads was the killers. They were the expensive part of your campaign. But they were the ones that people read the newspaper. And we had a county seat.
Did you have
newspaper.
signs?
Yeah, I had a lot of signs. A lot of signs that was, about 11 by 13 or whatever on stakes. And we put them out. And most of the big ones was homemade signs. The others was done by a company that we paid for. And had a few bumper stickers, but I'm not a bumper sticker person.
Didn't want one on your Lincoln, did you?
No, I didn't want one, and I don't want people to put theirs on. I may be for them, but it just never, and so I never asked people to really put a bumper sticker on. I don't know why, but, and I never asked anyone to ever endorse me in the newspaper. If I lost, I didn't want to drag them down with me. People always thought, well, she didn't, but I always was concerned about the well-being of the other person. I never wanted to ever drag them down, as you'd say. And so I just did, ring the bell for Annabelle, and I really,
Do you think your voters were mostly female and male, or did it lean one way or the other?
Female and male, but female's hard to get.
Even then?
Even then, probably. I don't know why females don't support females harder. I don't know. I always say, that you can have 10 standing there, and a lot of times, and a female can help you so much. And but I've had other females tell me this. Maybe the instinct of a female of jealousy, I don't know, but it shouldn't be that way. I always say if someone makes a good move, maybe there's another place for you and they can help you get where you would like to achieve that goal. If you're working for money and that person is successful, they may help you be successful in the same way. So I never walk into a room and apologize if I'm the only female in that room. I don't notice that. I'm there for the purpose of doing the job that I was sent there to do. And like you say, I'm a loner in a certain way. I love people. I love to be out with them, but I can take a trip by myself and have a good time.
Well, did you chair any committees?
No, I was vice chairman. At that time, didn't have many women that chaired committees because there was only 4 of us. But I did the vice chairman of the financial institutions, which was the banking and consumer credit and all of those areas. And so I stayed on that. And then I was the liaison on the Agriculture Committee between it and the Department of Ag. And so I was did a lot of work in that area. And of course, later, I was appointed county commissioner during the county commissioner scandals, and by Governor George Nye at that time.
And how long did you do that?
And I just did that for a short time because that wasn't what I wanted to run for. It was Canadian County, and I had District 2. And before I finished, I lost all my commissioners to the situation, as we call it. And so I was chairman, vice chairman, I was everything, but didn't, couldn't transact much business. So I set up the election, and there was a lady that was elected at that time. And then I lobbied after that a couple of years for the conservation districts, which I knew how to obtain the right area for funding, and there was 85 districts over Oklahoma, and I carried a lobby license, I guess you should say, at that time. And then someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I traveled quite a bit, and Carl has too, and said that they'd like for me to see me, that the international marketing coordinator was open over at the Department of Agriculture, and if I would be interested. And I said, well, I'm not really sure that I would be. But I did go to work right after that in September of 84, I guess. September of 84. And became a market coordinator for international in the Department of Agriculture. And then a year in 83, I went there. In 84, I became the director of marketing and international marketing, took over that area. And stayed there for 1994, I believe, or 5. And then I moved on and started their rural development committee for the Department of Ag, and knew that I was going to retire about a year later after that. And so we got that going. So that's how the international and market development, and most people see, Made in Oklahoma, the little logos, and Buy Oklahoma. That came from
That's you, huh?
That's me. Came from our office. And I did the farmers markets, and most of those farmer markets, we had about 10 or 15 when I came there, and we got up to around 35, 40 of them.
You've been back to the state for quite a while, haven't you?
Yes, sure have. And so that was another good thing that happened.
So since retirement, what have you been doing?
Well, I still do a little ag consulting. My phone still rings a lot. If there's, like I say, I'm always tell them, call their representative or theirs. But I've done a lot of traveling, and had the opportunity to go with President Carter's son, Chip Carter, to Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, and just got out of there before the heavy war started. And then I've spent a month in Vietnam, and traveled from the north to the south, and quite a bit of area. And so I've traveled about 60-some countries, and
great.
Continue to keep my passport up. But I've tried to do quite a bit in U.S. recently. And then we have what we call the /C Ranch, and it's still very big and very, we have several, almost 2,000 acres of wheat out, and the boys do, and so we worry about it. Do you still
drive the wheat truck?
No, I don't drive the wheat truck anymore. About
could.
6 years ago, 5, yes, I did for every year, and now the young boys at lease is just delightful, and we kind of leave it to them. They run a lot of cattle, and plant a lot of wheat, and we have a lot of alfalfa, and so it's
You watch the weather a lot.
watch the weather. Everything hinges on the weather for us, and we're proud of the ranch because we kind of keep it tidied up, and we have about a 25-mile circle. It's not all in one contingent area. We are in Canadian and Kingfisher County, but being this close to the city, you can see you can't buy land all that joins, but we have a lot of housing developments around us now, but we don't intend to sell. We're ranchers and farmers. So that's what we want to do. And Carl has never done another paycheck but his own. He's been devoted to farming and ranching, and he's an avid hunter. He just, in September, went to Maine bear hunting and got a black bear. But what makes you think about your life? You know, your family is important. Our daughter has 2 children, and they're both getting college education. One just graduated from hotel and restaurant and business management, and the other one's in cosmetology. And our daughter, she teaches for Francis Tuttle Votech. Has this starting her 22nd year, I believe, and she was a surgical nurse 9 years prior, and has several degrees, and finishing I believe it's in land management, so forth, with Colorado State through the internet. Will get her bachelor's degree in it, I think, in December.
She'll take over the ranch.
So, well, she's ready. Yeah, she'll take over the ranch when her time comes. So and she's she's an avid bow hunter. She's killed 2 black bear with bow bears. So, you know, I guess maybe one, and the other was a gun. But yeah, there's 2 black bears.
Any aspirations to go into politics? Any of this?
No, she was small when I was campaigning, and when the dog came out to bite her, she threw her stuff down and she said, "Don't ask me to campaign no more." So now she has no aspiration of going in that I've every once in a while mentioned it. No, she would rather be in wildlife and game and in that area. But she's really devoted to Francis Tuttle. She loves every portion of her job, and the faculty and her superiors is just
she's giving back
people
to the state too in
Yes.
that regard too.
She really is.
Well, would you have any advice for women that were thinking about politics or young girls?
Oh, I think the opportunities out there for any young girl, young lady. I think you have to focus on and be sincere about what you're going to run for. Just to be in politics is not the answer. And, we see this every once in a while whenever we see 8 or 10 or so on the ballot, and it's because I want a job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what the House of Representatives, the Senate, the governor, whatever it is not, I want a job. You're wanting to serve the people, and you're not there to strive to something that has irritated you over the years or whatever, because it may be just your project, nobody else's. So that's why people usually say education and health and things. And we have some real problems. We're going to have to fix a health problem. Mm-hmm. My criticism of the legislature, where we had the surpluses, we only had, I think at that time, 27 million surplus. We're in the 400 million surpluses now. And why not fix a large project for 3 or 4 years, like the teacher's retirement? Just take one time to get that thing turned around, that one big appropriation. Our lodges, We shouldn't have ever let them run down like they did. Because if an independent can make them work, the state of Oklahoma could have made those work, which we already owned, and done that project one year. Put so many million into those projects and brought them up to snuff. Now we're beginning to work on the bridges and highways and so forth. And our traffic is so tremendous that we'll barely keep up because, we used to not have the traffic. But we've got to think back that traffic and everything has changed. We're on a fast pace and more cars and more everything, more students. I don't like to see the bond issues anymore on my tax roll and anybody else, but something's got to give, and we've got to educate, and it has to be done. And I don't know where it'll stop. It's if I left for 10 years and come back, I wouldn't recognize my community, I'm sure.
Sounds like you might need to run again.
Oh, I'm not. You get a little years on you. I don't like to ever call myself old because I'm not. I like to think young and still like to do. And what'll set you back is be 30 months, 31. My husband was diagnosed as had pancreatic cancer. And pancreatic cancer is just almost the last resort, as you'd say. And he got this, found out that he had it by that we'd bought a farm south of El Reno about 30 months ago or more. And it had bindweed on it, and we sprayed it, and then we planted it back to wheat and rode the fence lines to see if there was any bindweed out in this field, and in doing so he got pneumonia, and he was in the hospital about 6 days, and as he got ready to come home he kind of chucked up, and the doctor said, "Carl, are you sick?" And Carl said, "No, everybody gets an upset stomach." And he said, "No, let's see you Monday and let's just take another look." So they did a scope, and they came out and told me he had pancreatic cancer, and that OU Med Center would be calling us not to call them, that the world's best was right there. And you know how you go home. I've been in government. I thought maybe that government person won't call me. And Monday morning, and that was on a Tuesday that we saw this doctor. Went in on the next day they called and told me that they'd see him on the following Tuesday at OU Med Center, and I thought, oh, happy day. And it was Dr. Poster, and he was an OSU graduate and an OU graduate and from back east, and just got in there to have Carl looked at, and Carl was feeling fine. Fire alarm went off, and we all had to get out of the building. So we come rushing back in while the doctor, he came right out and took a hold of my hand and took a hold of Carl's shoulder and said, "Don't leave, I want to see you now." So he took us back in, and Dr. Poster set him up there and said, "Carl, why are you here?" And Carl said, "I don't know, and I think it's time to go home." Just kind of kidding, because that's Carl's kind of a laid-back man. And he said, "Well, let me tell you why you're here. You have 9 months to live if you go home. And if I operate on you, we're going to do a whipple, and that takes part of your pancreas and all, and you'll 5% die on the operating table. I'm going to have to tell you that because it's not an easy operation, and then you can do as you wish." And Carl said, "Well, you didn't give me very good options, but I'm going to let you kill me now." And the doctor just took out his Palm Pilot and scheduled him to the med center. And the following Monday, we went in, and they rushed him. This kept hurting all this. And we were there about a month. He took this surgery, and it took about 7 hours. And he's completely cured. Just a miracle, and they wrote him up in the journal, I guess. And Dr. Poster, when he saw him, I know it was 30 months, he was in 2 weeks ago, and Dr. Poster said, 30 months! And no sign, and all of his blood and everything, and they call him a complete cure.
Well,
Just
thank
a
goodness for
miracle.
pneumonia, I guess.
And yeah, it was good. And so, here's how farming can help you. We bought the farm. Like you're saying, we rode the fence lines and got pneumonia. If he'd never bought the farm and had pneumonia, he'd never known it. So he said he wouldn't sell that farm on a bet. It saved his life. But from just the time, and why I say this on pancreatic, it was about the size of a pea. And in that week and a half span that we got in to have surgery, the one had grown the size of a golf ball.
It was quick.
Really quick. And then he took another experiment at the same time on his pancreas, which when you fool with that, you have to take insulin. And to wake that up after 15 days, they gave him, he said, that's all needles I can stand. He was kidding them. And they quit, but his pancreas woke up. He don't take insulin either. So he's a lucky, lucky man. Yeah, he really is. So we've had really a journey, a life's journey, and
So
politics has been very good to me.
When history's written about you, what would you like for it to say then? That's my last question.
She was there to help someone else. Truly there.
Is there anything I need to ask you that I haven't? Anything you wanted to cover that we haven't?
No, not especially. I always very seldom talk about all my life.
No, you've done great.
Very seldom.
I
Because I
appreciate
always say there's others a lot greater than I am. I was probably one of the nicest things. I was 2 years ago voted the Cattlewoman of the Year from the Oklahoma Cattlewomen.
And Mother of the Year, if I
Yeah, I
remember
was
correctly.
voted in '91 as Oklahoma Mother of the Year, and that was a good honor.
So I'd say a lot of people will be saying you were there to help them
Yeah.
along.
So and I was voted as Citizen of the Year here. I forgot what year for Canadian County here. So
Do you still have that dime?
yeah, so I have 2 or 3 thin dimes that I always tell people, and supported a lot of college education that people don't know where it came from, and that's always good. I had a lady one time that came to me, and she was worked a lot with the veterans and did a lot with the American Legion and the veterans born with the VFW. She wanted to go see her mother and didn't have any money. She was dying, and at that time, the planes didn't fly that much, and I bought the bus ticket and sent her on her way, and it was at the time not quite $100. And just before she passed away, she sent that 100 back.
That's sweet.
And
Now you can help it to use it to
Help
help someone
someone
else and
else.
keep it going. Yeah.
so,
Well, you're an amazing lady. I hope I can be sitting there in a chair when I'm your age too, being able to
Oh,
say the
thank
same thing.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're fine. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
And we'll cut this off before you.